everybody. Eve Harow, tour guide and podcaster and public speaker. Tisha B'Av, the day of B'chiyat Dorot, the day that symbolizes the destruction of Beit Rishon, of Beit Sheni, of many of the disasters that have befallen the Jewish people. But why? Why the 9th of Av? I'm standing here in a vineyard in the Eshkol region, south of Hebron. Let's go back. We're in the Midbar as a people after Mamad Har Sinai. And Moshe Rabbeinu sends people to scout the land. Lator et haaretz, mentioned 12 times in Parashat Shlach Lecha. When Moses sent them to scout the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up there into the Negev and into the hill country. Right now we're in the hill country. Are the people who dwell in it strong or weak, few or many? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Are the towns they live in open or fortified, the soil rich or poor, wooded or not? And take pains to bring back some of the fruit of the land. Now it happened to be the season of the first ripe grapes, which tells us that it's summer, because in Israel this is the season of the grapes. And Tu B'Av was even the festival, the wine harvest. Now these happen to be very small grapes because A, we're a little early in the season, and B, these are going to be turned into wine. But the scouts go out and they scout out the land and they go everywhere, and they reached Wadi Eshkol, somewhere in this region. And there they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes. It had to be borne on a carrying frame by 2 of them, and some pomegranates and figs, which also, incidentally, are what grow in Eretz Yisrael in the summertime. And then at the end of 40 days, they return from scouting the land. And what do? They give a bad report on the land. And the people freak out. And this is really what makes this the day of to be punished. And they want to go back to Mitzrayim. Our wives and children will be carried off. It would be better for us to go back to Egypt, which means, of course, erasing Matan Torah, erasing Mamad Har Sinai. And that's really why this generation is doomed to die in the desert. Not only did they not have enough faith, but they wanted to undo everything that had happened in the Midbar. Now, we all live on a very fine line when it comes to the word Yir'ah. Yir'ah can be translated 2 different ways. It can be translated as fear, and it can be translated as awe. And the perspective that you use when you go somewhere is the eyes that you look at can translate something into being afraid of it or into the wow. The same with the Beit HaMikdash. Country bumpkins, people who live in a 1 or maybe 2-story house, suddenly going to Yerushalayim and seeing this beautiful building. You could be afraid to enter, or you could be drawn in by the awe and the wow and the wonder of Hashem and of the Am coming together to be with Hashem. The people fall here, 10 out of the 12 spies, and they're only called spies later because of the report that they give. Lator ta'aretz means to look at the positive sense, like tourists who come here and are looking at the good part of the land. That's Kalev and Yehoshua. But the other 10, they see the bad. And also what they do is they don't report what they see, they editorialize. They did see very large communities, very large cities with thick walls, because yes, the people here were afraid of something. But had we had the emunah, had we had the faith that Hashem would bring us in and allow us to conquer the land, we might have understood that their civilizations were falling apart within those walls. They also did something terrible as they spoke dibah, lashon hara. They spoke against the land. And this is something that even those of us who live in Israel and have the privilege of living in Israel have to be careful of even until today. We can complain about the government, about the traffic, and about bureaucracy. Never complain about the land itself. Tovah haaretz me'od me'od. And the logo of the Ministry of Tourism is 2 people carrying an enormous bunch of grapes, because we have turned this around. And it is our mission, and we can't wait to do it again and for you all to come back here. It is our mission to show people the goodness of the land, to turn what could be fear into awe, and to understand the greatness of where we are, and to have the emunah that as long as we do what Hashem has asked us to do, He will give us the strength and the ability to do it. It's a partnership with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that they did not do that is the reason that Tisha B'Av became a terrible day for all of us until today. So hoping that very, very soon Tisha B'Av will be a day of joy and a day of gladness, and not the fast day and not the day where we grieve for so many things that befell our people on this date and for this reason.
Thank you so much, Eve, for showing us the location where the spies traveled. We can see with our own eyes the place where they were and really understand their sin. But it's very important that we not view the sin of the spies as something which happened in the past. We have commentaries which say outright that we are continuing this sin even in modern times. Just as an example, Rav Yaakov Emden, in the introduction to his Siddur that he calls Sulam Beit El, he says the following words: "Listen to me, my brothers, who are living in the lands that are not ours, on impure lands. Remember this. Remember God, and Jerusalem should enter your hearts. And don't think to remain in the diaspora, God forbid. This was the sin of our forefathers, which caused crying for generations, because they despised the desirable land." He connects anyone who doesn't have a desire to move to Israel, begin exploring it, thinking about it. He relates that back to the sin of the spies. Moving to more modern times, Rav Kook writes in the Sefer Eretz Chayfetz, he says that we do not rectify the sin of the spies who slandered the land. He said, we're not doing that, and therefore measure for measure we must tell and proclaim across the entire world its splendor and its magnificence, its holiness and its glory. Rav Kook says we have a responsibility not just about moving to Israel, but about how we talk about the land of Israel. We must fight with all our strength against any hatred of our holy land, which has begun to affect some of us. And he connects that to the sin of the spies. So it's a desire to live in Israel, it's the willingness to defend Israel, and not to buy into all the slander about Israel, which we certainly experience in our time as well. And then finally, Rav Techtal in Imam Banes Mecha, he says the same idea. Just as during the time of the spies, all of Israel united for evil to oppose the land of Israel, today as well, we must unify all of Israel for good, to support Israel. And he says, in this way, we pay off our debt and we tear up the responsibility, the liability that we have, and that, B'ezrat Hashem, will help bring the final redemption. Let's all commit, as we learn about the sin of the spies, to rectify that sin, to have a love for Israel, to desire Israel, to want to live in Israel, to explore the idea of living in Israel, speak out for Israel, and certainly not buy into the slander about Israel. And that will help us rectify the sin and help us bring about the coming of the Mashiach.